What's going on, guys? So I was going out for a little drive today and I figured I'd make a video for you. And in this video, I specifically want to address why I went through 3 different engines and just talk about that situation a little bit. I've had multiple people ask why I went through 3 engines, and I've had others ask why I would keep my car if I keep blowing up engines. So this video is really meant to explain that. I think I got that out of my system. But yeah, I've had people ask why I went through 3 different engines and why I would keep my car if I went through 3 engines. So first of all, let me just start off by saying that I didn't blow up 3 engines. I had 3 engine failures and they were all due to different reasons. And in fact, none of them were due to the engine failing itself. It was always some other component that caused a failure. So that is a huge and very important distinction to make. Obviously, if the engine kept blowing up for the same exact reason, I wouldn't keep doing it. I would probably sell my car. That also leads me to my next point. A STI with an engine, a running engine, whether it's the original engine, an OEM short block, or a built engine, regardless, most of the Hawkeyes right now are going for close to $20,000. I've had people debate me on that. I really don't care if people don't believe me. I mean, you could look online and see what they're going for. Would I personally pay, 20 grand for a Hawkeye with 100,000 miles on the original engine and none of the service done on it? No, personally, I wouldn't do that, but people are willing to do that, and that's what dictates the market value. So, if my car is running, I could probably sell it for around 20 grand. Regardless of what's wrong with my car, if I don't have an engine in it, best I'm gonna get is about 10 grand, because obviously somebody's gonna have to put a new engine in it. So if my car isn't running and I try to sell it, that right there just cuts the price in half. So if I would sell my car for like 10 grand, what other car am I gonna get that's decent for 10 grand? I'd personally just rather put that 10 grand into a new engine and, have a running car that I love that is going to continue to appreciate in value. So that's why I kept my car. So my first engine failure happened when I was still living in South Carolina. This was probably the end of 2012 or so, and it happened at about 130,000 miles. Now what happened was the lower radiator hose actually split open on the highway while I was going like 70, and I was in traffic. So I didn't notice it right away, otherwise I obviously would have cut the car off. But I was more focused on traffic and passing people and just everything else going on. So unfortunately, I didn't catch it in time and my engine seized up. I have no doubt that if the lower radiator hose had held together, the engine would have lasted longer. I don't know if it still would have been together today, but I'm sure it would have done a lot better. So the first failure was no fault of the engine. And, for everything that people say about how unreliable Subaru engines are and how horrible they are, my original one lasted 130,000 miles and I was on stage 2 at the time. So when I rebuilt that engine, I went with an OEM short block for 2 reasons. Number 1, money was incredibly tight for me. Somehow it always is. And I just did not have the extra $1,000 to go with a built block. The second reason is because at the time, I really wasn't trying to make crazy power. I would have been totally happy with like 350 to the wheels. And a standard block can handle that without much of an issue. So that is why I chose an OEM short block. My mistake was having the local Subaru dealer do the work for me. At the time, I was young and I was naive, and I figured, hey, they're Subaru, they should know how to rebuild an engine. I wasn't even thinking that most of the work they're doing is warranty work and they don't know what they're doing as far as a rebuild. Without getting too far into it, it was a total nightmare trying to have them work on my car. They didn't know what they were doing. I got my car back with multiple issues. It had vacuum leaks, the timing belt guide was loose. In fact, I had a coil pack pop out of the side of my engine block while I was driving, and that to me was just, I was pissed. I was so pissed. I take it back into them and, they basically just shrugged their shoulders and are like, hey, things happen. And I was just not accepting that because I told them, hey, I've replaced my own spark plugs before and I had never had that issue. So needless to say, it was a mistake to go with Subaru. Fortunately for me, I came across AV Tuning and Development down there. If you're in the area, I recommend checking them out for engine builds and tuning. Anthony over there went through everything that they did, found a bunch of stuff that was not done properly. He did it correctly and he got me tuned And this was the same time that I actually upgraded my turbo and my fuel injectors and a few other things. But as I said, I was on a OEM short block. Fast forward to January of 2015, and I am separating active duty Air Force, moving back home to Pittsburgh to go to school full time. It was not long after that I had my second engine failure, and once again, this was not due to the engine itself failing, but rather another component. So I remember this very distinctly. I was driving my mom to work on Mother's Day, nonetheless, and just shout out to my mom for putting up with my crap, because we were stuck on the road for a little while because my engine blew up on Mother's Day, and fortunately she had a coworker who could come and pick her up and take her to work, and I was able to get a tow and had the car towed over to, at the time, More Performance to have my engine rebuilt again. So what happened was the original MAF sensor that was on the car basically started to fail, and it was not metering the airflow correctly, and it could not give the correct air-fuel ratio, and the car leaned out and blew up. And it really didn't give all that much notice at all. Again, I was on the highway, so I was kind of screwed. But I was driving, I hear ting, 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 boom, and that was it. And fortunately, nobody was near me, nobody was around me. But I was able to pull over because obviously once my engine stopped running, I lost power steering and power brakes. And I was in the fast lane, of course, but I was able to make it over to the shoulder safely, thankfully. So yeah, again, another engine failure, not due to the engine whatsoever. So I had the engine rebuilt at More Performance at the time. Now it's 6-star SPF, which I still go there for all of my service, basically. Went with a stage 1 all-wheel drive tuning block, which is capable of 400 wheel horsepower, and had it rebuilt, had everything put back together. I upgraded my fuel rails, fuel injectors, and some other things because I eventually knew that I wanted to go with flex fuel. So I was getting everything set for that whenever that time comes. Still not flex fuel, but it'll be coming. But that was the second engine. Again, not the engine's fault. After that, fast forward again. By the way, this is 2015, right? So this is when I started my channel, and I was in my mom's car and I was like, hey guys, I'm starting this channel, but I have a Subaru, I have an STI, but I don't have it with me, it's blown up. Which is basically, I feel like, the story for every car guy. You know, whether you have a Subaru or an Evo or a Civic or whatever, you know, if you're a car guy, let's be honest about how often your car is really in the shop. So fast forward to 2017, I believe it was. I have a whole rebuild series on the third engine failure because at that point I already had my YouTube channel. So this last failure was the closest it has ever been to the actual engine failing. The third failure, I'm not sure what caused it, but it was actually one of the snap rings that hold the wrist pins in place that had snapped, apparently. I don't know if it got too hot or if it just had a defect in it or what. It's not common at all to have that issue, and it's pretty rare from my understanding. Anyway, one of those snapped, obviously, ended up in my engine, and it was the wrist pin that was going back and forth. I posted a video on Instagram and possibly on YouTube, don't remember. But I posted a video, I know for sure, on Instagram saying, hey, what is this noise? Does anybody recognize it? And I had a few people put in the comments what they thought it was, but it actually turned out to be the wrist pin that was failing. And, you know, it was just going back and forth, which isn't cool. So again, I went to 6-star SPF for my engine rebuild. They took care of me. I went with an IAG Stage 1 Plus short block. I love it. It's going strong. And there you go. So if you want to watch the rebuild series, I have that. And I'm being completely honest and upfront with you guys about how much it costs to rebuild my engine. I've had people tell me, oh, you should have did it yourself. I had other people tell me, oh, you're an idiot for not doing it, or they're ripping you off for how much they're charging. No, you guys, that's how much it costs to rebuild an engine and rebuild it properly from a good, reputable shop. You know, it's not cheap to rebuild engines, and I honestly don't know why guys pretend like it is. So I hope this video explains why I went through 3 engines and why I kept this car. If you have any questions, as I said, drop it in the comments down below. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. The engine would have lasted longer. I don't know if it would still be together to get